Good morning. So today is the Feast of St. Francis. Pray a special prayer for Father Michael. Poor guy, he's in Assisi today. And he's overwhelmed by how the quiet little sleepy hamlet of Assisi is just overrun by people there for the Transitus of Francis and all of that. I just can't help but laugh. We've got a group of priest friends, and we're all just like, this is hilarious. Anyway, Francis is one of the probably most well-known saints of the church, but also one of the most confusing. Francis was born into a very wealthy family in Assisi, and he was, he had everything that he could possibly want. He was an aristocrat. His father was wealthy, had a prominent position. He really, because it was back in the 800s or so. So if you were rich, then you really didn't have to do anything because the serfs did everything. And he decided that he was just going to renounce that after God appeared to him. He said, "I'm gonna follow Christ in a really radical way." And so he told his dad that, of course, on the steps of the city hall or the courthouse. And his dad's like, "That's crazy. You can't renounce all your riches and your inheritance and everything." And he says, "Well, to prove that I'm going to renounce it all," he took off all his clothes right there and said, "I'm going to follow Christ." And he walked away. He was seen by some as a little bit kooky because he then kind of lived in the woods for a while and he talked to animals. People, think, "Oh, he talked to animals. That's great." So, he loved the little bunnies and the little deer. He loved God, and he loved God's creation, the natural order, but of course also the pinnacle of creation, which is man. And he desired for all of us to encounter God in the same way and to have that radical holiness. So yes, he spoke of Mother Earth and Sister Moon and brother whoever else. I can't remember how the Canticle of the Sun goes. But he also speaks of Sister Death. That's why we have that skull there. It's a reminder, memento mori, right? All of us are going to die one day. All the riches, all the treasures of this world will pass away, and what will remain is our relationship with Jesus Christ. And so Francis desired for people to know Christ in a real way, so he really strove to conform himself to Christ, as we heard in the collect, in poverty and in humility. So much so that his habit became basically just kind of some rags. He just, cobbled something together and said, "This is what I'm going to wear to express my poverty." The Franciscans today, still, they're a mendicant order. That means that they have to rely on the generosity of others. They beg. There are some groups of Franciscans. There's the Franciscans of the Primitive Observance. There's the Franciscans, the CFRs, that really, really embrace poverty. Like they live in their houses with no electricity, with no heat. They don't wear shoes. We had a group of them at the seminary for a couple of years that they were there in preparation for ordination, and I think I've told this story probably every year on the Feast of St. Francis, but we set up for them in their guest rooms when they came to visit, and we made their beds and everything, and when they left, we looked, and the beds were still perfectly made, and thought, "What? Oh, they slept on the floor. They don't sleep in beds. They walk around barefoot," and we think, well, that's weird. Isn't that a little excessive? Yeah, it is a little excessive, and it makes us pause and look and say, wow, that's exactly what Francis did, right? People probably looked at him and said, "I think this is a little excessive, Francis," right? There was another occasion where he decided to take his clothes off and throw himself into a thorn bush for penance. A little excessive, yeah. So much so, though, that then Francis even suffered the stigmata, right? The wounds of Christ, his hands and his feet and his side were pierced, and he suffered the wounds of Christ. I don't know, when we think about the stigmata, maybe we think, oh, the stigmata, that's nice. There's Francis, there's Padre Pio, whichever other saints have got the stigmata, and I think that's nice. They just have these little, red marks on their hands and their feet. No, they're wounds that actually bleed and hurt. They're really united to Christ in his suffering. God gives us that as an example, as a witness for us to see that suffering, to see that desire for holiness. That's something really, truly beautiful. So St. Francis inspires us to recognize God in others, to recognize God around us. But most importantly, he inspires us to really imitate Christ in just the most profound way possible. Not just by, taking care of nature and being nice to the little bunnies, but rather by really striving to conform our lives to Christ. Poverty and humility and in suffering. Because all of that brings about the joy of the resurrection. All of that brings about salvation. All of that brings about eternal joy. So on this feast of St. Francis, let us pray for ourselves, that indeed we may continue to be conformed more and more to Christ in poverty and humility, and even at times in suffering, so that we may unite ourselves ever more closely to Christ.